All right, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to go ahead and just get started with a word of prayer. Lord, I thank you. I thank you so very much that you have condescended to be involved with your creatures, Lord, that you took on flesh and you lived among us. That for a time you were Jewish, that you had a government over you, that you lived here and you showed us how to do it too. And I praise you, Lord, and I thank you for that. And God, tonight as we come to talk about the ethics of government and authority and who we are and who you've called us to be here and now, Lord, I pray for your words to come through, for your scripture to speak, for your spirit to instruct, guide us, Lord, to be more like you and to honor you in this life that you've given us. Lord, we praise you and we thank you, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. We're going to talk about government and authority. And the three topics that y'all brought up when we did the brainstorm kind of thing was resistance to the government, masks and vaccines, and what do we do when the government disregards the Constitution? So, nothing crazy, just some run-of-the-mill subjects for us to talk about tonight. Before we go any further on that, let me make a quick clarifying comment, because I got a lot of questions about week 5, where we're talking about gender in heaven and will be made like the angels. I probably overspoke. I haven't gone back to listen to it, but if I said anything like we won't have gender in heaven, forgive me. I think that's a step too far. I don't think that's what the Bible says. When it says we will be made like the angels in heaven, the clear teaching there is that marriage is going to go away. So the person that you sit next to, you're not really going to care about them all that much in heaven, but your gender may well be there. My simple point is this, is if you get rid of marriage and you get rid of sex, and we're like the angels, maybe gender won't be as much of a part of our eternal identity anymore in heaven. Perhaps like being the bride of Christ or being the people of God. Maybe that will be the thing at the forefront of our identity. I assume it's the case that way with angels. I have no idea, but not trying to go so far as to say a gender is gone. Just that we'll be made like the angels, and it's fun to think about what that might be. Okay. Back to the issue of government and authority. Last week, Roger began to talk about some social issues, and within the social world, as we begin to interact with other Christians or non-Christians, we have responsibilities. We have things that we know God is calling us to do, and that affects a variety of issues, from immigration to social justice and to baking a cake, or something like that. All of those issues kind of tie up in there. Today we're going to talk about government and authority, and we're going to take all of that social stuff that we've learned, and also those aspects of identity that we had, and we're going to bring them together here in this discussion on government and authority. So I want to start off with a couple questions. Who here is an American? Quick show of hands. Yeah. Who's proud to be an American? Keep your hand up if you feel that way. Yeah, I'm proud. I love this country, and I'm proud to be an American. Who here would die for this country? I'm just curious. Cool. I would do it. I'd die for this country in a heartbeat. Okay. As a citizen of the United States of America, the United States of America, do you have responsibilities? Yes. Yeah, we all have we have responsibilities as citizens of this country, and we also have rights, right? And that's what kind of citizenship gives you. It gives you rights, and it gives you responsibilities. Who here is a Christian? Amen. Are you proud to be a Christian? Amen. Yes. Would you die for the kingdom of heaven? I hope so. Yeah. Are you aware that you also have responsibilities as a member of the kingdom of heaven? Yes, I get that. And you have rights even as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. Rights. Right to eternal life. right to a relationship with God, to the Holy Spirit, to the church. Being a citizen of heaven comes with so many blessings that are ours through unity with Christ Jesus. So it's pretty awesome. Now, all of you have just, in one way or another, pledged allegiance to two separate countries. And as Christians, this becomes our unique point of difficulty when it comes to ethical issues of being an American and being a Christian. For most of life, those two things aren't going to negatively impact one another. In fact, they might complement one another, but there may be times when you're going to have to pick and choose. Who am I going to listen to? Which identity comes first today? And as we go through this topic of government and authority, I want you to remember that we're going to talk about this in the context of citizenship to a particular country here on earth, okay? So I want to start with something that might seem obvious, but number one, you have a heavenly identity. Or you could say, I have citizenship in heaven. Two texts, super important for this one. Philippians, Phil, 3:20. And 1 Peter 2, 9 through 10. Whoa. 2, 9 through 10. These are wonderful passages about our citizenship and who we belong to. Philippians 3:20. But our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. It's what we've been studying, right, this whole time in 1 Corinthians. But he begins by saying, you Philippians, you citizens of Rome, your citizenship is in heaven. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 through 10. Peter now speaking not to the citizens of just one city, but of several, to the residents of Asia Minor. He says, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. And here's one of the coolest parts about citizenship in heaven, God's special possession. I'm happy to say that I'm a citizen of the United States of America. I'm not quite happy to say that I belong to America, that America owns me. But I am happy to say that my God owns me. He is my master, and I am his possession. He called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. So some takeaways here. Number one, I am a citizen of heaven. And how do we get citizenship, by the way, into heaven?
By faith in Jesus.
By faith in Jesus, yeah. There's this really easy entrance exam. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you confess your sins? You're like, yeah, I've got all that, and that's great. But what we have to also remember is that the only way for this flesh and blood to inherit the kingdom of God, if you've been studying that text this week, is for Christ to die for us. Citizenship for us comes at the highest possible price. You got to pay a lot of money to be a citizen of heaven. More money than you and I ever have. And that is paid for through the blood of Christ. Therefore, we belong to God. It's the second piece of this heavenly identity. You belong to God. You are bought with a price. Citizenship comes through the sacrifice of Christ. And this identity is eternal. That is super important. It never ends. You are a citizen of heaven now, and you will be forever. And because of that, there's this transcendent aspect to this citizenship. It is going to supersede and overwhelm every other identity in terms of like a nationality that we have, okay? Questions on this first point, that you have a heavenly identity? All right, we're all following. Good deal. We're going to go on to the second point of doctrine that kind of helps build out our ethic. Our second point of doctrine helps build up this kind of doctrinal foundation to this issue. The second one, while you're on earth, you are a stranger, sojourner, and even exile. These names, they come from the Old Testament. They come from Abraham. They come from the Israelites during their exile. They come from the time of the Israelites before they inherited the promised land, when it was just Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They were strangers and sojourners in the land of Israel. They were living in tents. God never let them build permanent dwellings. So these names actually come from the Old Testament, but interestingly, it's Peter who then applies them to the church in the New Testament. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect exiles scattered throughout the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. To God's elect exiles. The way that Peter describes the church is that we are exiles. And the idea there, the actual word is kind of this diaspora word. And it goes back to when the nation of Israel was destroyed and the Jews were scattered throughout the world, right? And he's now applying that to the church. That the church's nation, the church's borders are gone, and that we've been scattered throughout the world. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 17. So Peter will continue to use these names throughout his letter. He'll say in verse 17, since you call on a Father who judges each person's work impartially, live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. So now the word strangers or foreigners, sojourners means you travel, like you don't have a place to live, right? So the way that you should see yourself here on earth, your identity is as a foreigner. Has anyone ever lived abroad? Yeah? What was that like to be living abroad? How long?
13 years.
Where'd you live?
Brazil, India, South Africa.
Okay. Some fun places.
Singapore.
What was it like to be a foreigner?
You're half the time you didn't even know what questions to ask.
Okay, right on. A lot of confusion, yeah.
Language.
Yeah, sure, yep.
And custom.
Yep.
And culture.
Yep.
All of that. Learning how to eat their foods.
Yep.
Making sure you don't offend people.
Yep.
All of that.
So some of it, as an American living overseas, as a foreigner, some of it is learning to adopt the customs of the place in which you live. Yeah. You eat their food. You go to their stores. You live among them. But at the same time, everyone who sees you takes everything you do, and they make that reflect on
your country.
Your country, America, right? And so Peter's point here to the church is that, yes, you're a stranger, you're a foreigner, and that you are going to adopt some of the customs around you. You're going to live among these people, but also everything you do reflects on the kingdom of heaven, okay? Also, when you are living abroad, do you think, this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life? No, what do you think?
Home.
I'm going to get back home eventually. Eventually, I'm coming back to the States, right? Eventually, I'm coming back home. And that's the second thing, is when you're living as a stranger and a foreigner in exile, don't make your home here. Because you're going back home soon. Right? If you got a home, it's temporary. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 through 25. This is a long one. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. When you're a foreigner, the people, the locals, they're just going to hate you. Some of them are just going to not like you. You might get blamed with things that you didn't do. And so he says, make sure that your good deeds, so live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they're going to accuse you, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to governors, like the king, the Caesar, or the local governor, who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. The testimony of the church should shine so brightly that no matter what the world accuses us of, they look dumb. That's what he's saying there. Live as free people, but don't use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as free people. We'll get to what that means at the end, but that's a big statement. Hold on. Live as free people, but don't use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. So he's talking about free citizens there. And then he goes further. Slaves. In reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to their masters, not only those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. So I want you to hear this. So you have a slave, and they have a master, and their master is trash. He's an evil man. And he makes their life unbearably, or not unbearably, just very difficult, right? And Peter is saying that when you bear up under that because of God, that's commendable. So don't just grit your teeth and get through it. When you do it because of God, it's commendable. And we have to ask ourselves, why is it commendable? 21, to this you are called. You're called to a life of suffering because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. Christ suffered under unjust men. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. Verse 23, when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate when he suffered. He made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sin and live forever. By his wounds you have been healed, for you were like sheep going astray, but now you've returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. Your citizenship was bought in the blood of Christ, and that becomes for you a code of conduct for your time among the Gentiles. Key takeaways from this passage. So that's just 1 Peter 1:17 and 2:11 through 25. First, we need to embrace the identity as foreigners and strangers and exiles here on earth. Secondly, you have more right to disobey the laws of the land than anybody else on planet Earth. You have more right to. He says, live as people who are free. Why? Because your citizenship is in heaven. I'm not from here. So I had friends in high school who committed crimes in Korea, and they just left. They just left Korea, and they went back to the States. Like, if I can get away from here, the laws don't apply to me. That's what they did. It's not a good thing. You have more reason than anybody to be free. But what does God say? Don't use your freedom as a cover-up for evil, right? Submit to the laws of the land. Because we represent heaven, we must be righteous. That's one thing he brings out. Submissive. That's a second thing he brings out. Especially good towards other Christians. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but because we are exiles together, you have to be extra good to other Christians. Has anybody lived overseas and known other Americans while you were there? What's the bond like between Americans overseas?
It's pretty tight. You have the Americans.
Yeah.
You have the Americans.
Yes.
International Americans.
Yes.
You have the Christian Americans.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of groups.
And there are people that in the States you would not have probably been friends with.
Right.
But overseas, now that you're all exiles, you're super tight.
Absolutely.
The Korean community, which my wife and I spent our whole time growing up here in the U.S., is very tight. And a bunch of Koreans who back in Korea would not have been friends are family here because they're exiles.
Yeah.
They're foreigners. And we should have the same relationship with other Christians because we're all foreigners in a foreign land. And we can endure our time as foreigners because it's tough by looking to Christ. It's the last takeaway from this first point. Questions on the second one of you are a stranger, a sojourner, exile.
I have a question. In verse 23 it says, "And when he was reviled not again, and when he suffered, he threatened not." What does it mean when it says he suffered? Because a lot of Jesus' life is not depicted or told about. The younger life, they went to the temple and they couldn't find him.
Yeah, I think particularly he's right there talking about Jesus like at his trial when they're hurling threats against him and they're insulting him and the crowds are cheering for him to be killed and the Pharisees are calling him a blasphemer even though he's God. I think that's primarily the scene that he's thinking of. But it could be broader than that. Go ahead.
There are glimpses in the Psalms.
Yes.
There's some messianic Psalms that talk about when he was growing up, and it was not pretty.
Yeah, there are some messianic psalms like that. So there's lots of suffering in Jesus' life. But in particular there, he's reminding us that it was through his suffering that we are saved, right? And so we can endure suffering by looking to Christ.
So another quick question. So like when it says that he went to his own, and his own received him not, would that be like they just didn't believe, that's why they didn't receive him?
Yeah. So like when he went to his own and his own received him not. So like Nazareth is like really big one there. He goes to Nazareth and he's like, these words have been fulfilled in your reading, and the city is like, we're going to throw you off a cliff, right? His own received him not. It's kind of an understatement. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Do you think in Nazareth, he wasn't received because they were jealous of him?
When we look at what they say, they just think it's audacious. They're like, we've seen you grow up. We know who your mom and dad are. We know who your brothers and sisters are. Don't you dare tell us that you're the Son of God.
Oh, that kind of attitude.
That kind of attitude,
Okay.
yeah. We know you, Jesus. You can convince them that you're Messiah. We know who you really are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's like, a prophet has no honor in their home. It's a fulfillment of this is just normal, right?
Definition of an expert.
Yeah.
Someone who's more than 50 miles from home.
Yeah, definition of an expert. Someone who's more than 50 miles from. That's really good. Yeah.
That's good.
All right. Here's the second one. You have an earthly identity. So if we stop just at the top, we're really imbalanced. We won't have a good theology of how to respond to our governments and live in this life if we only have those two. Now, these are the most important, but we also need to build out our earthly identity theology, okay? So there's not like a lot of, I guess, passages about this, but there's a lot of stories where earthly identities come up and they become pretty important. So Acts chapter 21 is one of them. It's Paul's final trip to the city of Jerusalem. Acts 21, verses 39 through chapter 22, verse 3. Paul comes into the city and he tells the church about all the cool things that have happened in Ephesus and Philippi and all these other places. And then the church is like, okay, that's cool, Paul, but like God is doing really cool things here too, right? And it's just kind of not the best welcome. So a little bit of a disappointment. The next day, Paul decides to take some people to the temple, and the Jews get real freaked out, and they think that Paul has somehow violated their customs, although he hasn't, and a riot breaks out. 37. As the soldiers were about to take Paul into the barracks, he asked the commander, so that this riot is happening, and the Romans come in and they grab him. He says, may I ask you something? May I say something to you? And then the commander speaks back, do you speak Greek? And then he says, aren't you the Egyptian who started a revolt and led 4,000 terrorists out into the wilderness some time ago? So we got a little case of mistaken identity, right? That's what the Romans are thinking. And Paul's like, I'm a Jew from Tarsus of Cilicia, which is in Spain, far away. A citizen of no ordinary city. Doesn't say, I'm a citizen of heaven. He says, I'm a citizen of no ordinary city. What does that mean?
He's different.
He's different. What's the no ordinary city that he's making reference to?
He's special.
Special? He's talking about a literal city here on earth.
Rome?
He's talking about Rome. He's name dropping. Because this is the Roman Empire. This is not like in this situation, it's almost like a one world government for them, right? And Rome, that city, is the city by which this whole world has now been named, right? And he's like, I'm a citizen of no ordinary city, right? He's name dropping Rome. He's flexing his Roman citizenship. Please let me speak to the people. And after receiving the commander's permission, Paul stood on the front steps and he motioned to the crowd. And when they were all silent, he said to them in Aramaic. So the people were talking Aramaic. When he was talking to the Romans, he speaks Greek. And when he goes back to the people, he goes back to Aramaic. Switching dialects. These worldly identities can be shifting, right? And then verse 1, brothers and fathers. He appeals to them as brothers and fathers. These people are Jews. And the first thing he does, he says, I'm one of you. We're family. Listen now to my defense. When they heard him speak in Aramaic, they became very quiet. And so as soon as they hear the Aramaic, they're like, okay, well, let's listen up. Then Paul said, I am a Christian. No, he didn't. That's not what he said at all. He said, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, in Jerusalem. He's saying, hey guys, this is my hometown. I grew up over there playing in that sandbox. I'm one of you. I studied under Gamaliel, and I was thoroughly trained in the law of our ancestors, and I was just as zealous for God as any of you are today. Now he keeps talking, starts talking about the gospel, and they mob him one more time. And the Romans are like, I'm tired of this guy. And I want you to jump down to verse 25. As they stretched him out to flog him, right? So he stirs up the crowd once again. He gets beaten up once again. The Romans take him over, and they're like, I don't even know what you've done, but you're causing such a problem that we're just going to flog you, right? Paul said to the centurion standing there, I want you guys to imagine, by the way, that you lived in a state where the police can just flog you because people don't like you. That's where they're at, right? He says right before, like he's stretched out, and the whip's here, and Paul's like, hey, by the way, is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't even been found guilty? And it's like a moment, like verse 26, when the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. What are you going to do? He asked him. This man is a Roman citizen. The commander went to Paul and asked, tell me, are you a Roman citizen? Yes, I am, he answered. Then the commander said, I had to pay a lot of money for my citizenship, but I was born a citizen, Paul replied. He one-upped again. He is just name-dropping and one-upping and flexing his earthly citizenship as much as possible. Those who were about to interrogate him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized that he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. You see, there was only the right to due process for Romans in their society. Everybody else didn't get that right. So if you got the Roman citizenship, you kind of flex it. Now, as much as Paul was willing to flex his Roman citizenship, Romans 9, verses 2 through 3, for I wish that I myself were cursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my people. Who is my people, Paul? Is it going to be the Romans? No. Those of my own race, the people of Israel. When he talks about my people, he doesn't think of Rome. He thinks of the Israelites. Theirs is the adoption to sonship. Theirs the divine glory, the covenants, the receiving of the law of the temple, worship, and the promises. I am very proud to be an American. And one of the things that makes me incredibly proud to be an American is I can simultaneously be very proud to be a Korean, or at least partly Korean. And I would happily die for the country of Korea any day of the week. What are your ethnicities in the room? What do we got?
German.
Are you proud of being German? Yeah?
Native American.
Native American. Are you proud of that?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Scandinavian.
Scandinavian? Do you eat lutefisk or whatever Scandinavians do. Yuck. No, not that proud. Didn't go that. No fermented shark for you. Yeah.
Scots, Irish, English, so I'm really conflicted.
Really conflicted about who to be proud of. Yeah, because there's a lot of there's a lot of issues between
Yes.
those guys. Yeah. So you can have a nationality like your citizenship. You have a citizenship to a country like Rome, but you can also be proud of your heritage, proud of your ethnicity. So here's the takeaways from this third point. You have an earthly identity, and it is attached to your citizenship and your background, your heritage, and where you're from. You can be proud of your hometown. You can be proud of your earthly identities. You can flex them. You can brag about your American citizenship. Secondly, your earthly citizenship will come with laws that you must obey and rights, right? Rights that you may exercise and even leverage for the kingdom of God. Being an American comes with some special abilities. Like, here's one. In South Korea, if you have a South Korean passport, it's impossible to get into North Korea. You know that? They will not let you come in. But as an American with an American passport, did you know that it's incredibly easy to get into North Korea? In fact, any of you right now could go buy a ticket to North Korea and just go right now. No questions asked, and they would let you in. And they would give you a tour to let you think that North Korea is great.
Will they let you out?
What's that? Getting out might be, well, don't steal anything because they will take you and put you in a jail. Yeah, they don't care. Yeah, sorry?
Will they let you out?
They will. Yeah. They will let you out and they'll say, go home and tell everybody how great it is here. Yeah. No, you have no problem getting into North Korea. So your passport comes with special privileges. Use them. All right? Lastly, it's totally acceptable to love your earthly identity to the point of self-sacrifice. Paul said, I wish I could be accursed for the sake of my Jews. If the Jews would accept their Messiah, I would go to hell forever. I'm good with that. That's what Paul says. That's how much he loves his fellow Jews. But never more than God or your heavenly identity. This needs to come first. It's okay to love this. It's good to love this. But it can't come before this. Okay? Any questions on you have an earthly identity?
I had a question about when you were talking about Paul, talking to the Jews. Some of those Jews also knew that he killed Christians.
You would think that some of them would remember him. Yeah. It must have been a long time since that point, because I didn't go into it for this, but after this, the Romans are like, what do we do? And they give him back over to the Jews so that the Sanhedrin can try him. And he walks into the Sanhedrin. And remember, Paul's been mobbed several times by this point. And Paul walks up to the Sanhedrin and he says, my brothers, I promise you that I have done everything so far in good conscience. And the high priest is like, smack him. He gets one sentence out, but he's hit again in the face. And he's like, curse you, you whitewashed tomb. You read the law, but you violate it. And then he gets in trouble because it's the high priest, which is basically like the president of Israel for all intents and purposes in the Jewish system.
So being a Roman citizen doesn't protect him from the high priest.
It sure didn't. When the high priest said smack him, he just wailed on him. He got all mad about it. And then he had to say sorry, which is really interesting. Okay, any other questions on earthly identity?
I got a question. So if he was a Jew, and he killed Jews,
He killed Jewish Christians.
and since he did that, did he think he was doing the work of God?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. When he says, I had zeal for God, he'll say in other places, I had so much zeal for God, I persecuted the church.
Because I remember, I can't remember what the verse is, but it talks about that Israel has a zeal for God without knowledge.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what Paul will say. He'll say, I'm as zealous as you guys are. Like Muslims are zealous for God, but without knowledge. The Jews are zealous for God, but without knowledge. Good.
Trying to establish righteousness without God is what they were doing.
They were trying to achieve righteousness by obedience to the law, which no man can do. So they basically were outwardly obeying the law, but not inwardly. And they were calling themselves righteous, patting themselves on the back. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be true to say, too, though, not about this is in the moral part of Paul's actions, but Paul, from a civil law standpoint, was operating under an appropriate legal justification to kill Christians.
Yeah, in his world. Yeah, yeah. He got letters from the Sanhedrin to go persecute Christians.
The Sanhedrin had been delegated authority on religious matters by the Roman government.
Bingo. Yeah, they could. So like, in the Roman world, in the whole Roman world, no one has religious freedom. Everyone must worship the Roman gods, except for the Jews. The Jews are so committed to not worshiping idols at this point and only worshiping God, which is so different than their entire history. But they're so committed to it that they keep rebelling and they keep rebelling and they keep rebelling, and they rebelled against the Greeks and they rebelled against the Romans. The Romans like, okay, fine, like, you do you, but the Sanhedrin will now oversee all religious matters in your country. And if somebody obeys your own religious laws, they would be the ones to go out and arrest or kill those people. They had killed so many of their own people that the Romans were like, okay, you have to stop killing people, but like, just let us know when you're going to do it. If you're going to go kill somebody, you have to get permission from us, but stop killing people. So that was their political situation at the time. Good. What else? Any other questions? All right. Fourth one. Governments. And I didn't write this in your handout, but I woid just add, if you're doing notes, governments and nations, both, are established by God. When Paul goes to the Areopagus, he says that God has established borders and nations that people might seek him out. God is establishing nations, he's establishing borders, particularly here because we're talking about governments. He establishes governments. So this is a verse that's a set of verses that we've all spent a lot of time with in the last couple of years. Romans 12, 17 through 13:7. So it begins by saying, don't repay anyone evil for evil. Verse 19, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. Okay, so the subject at the end of 12 is don't take revenge, leave room for God's wrath. And then in chapter 13, and remember that Paul didn't stop writing, write the number 13 and then keep going, right? He's just free-flowing here. So he moves from God's wrath to chapter 13, verse 1. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities. And you're thinking, how does he move from God's wrath to governing authorities? Well, you'll see in a second. For there's no authority except which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from the fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one who is in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. So it's super interesting here. When somebody does evil against you, the temptation is to take justice into your own hands and say, I'm going to kill him, right? Or beat him up, or X, Y, Z. And then Paul says, don't do that. Say, God, get wrath for me. And the next thing that Paul says is, hey, by the way, the government is God's agent of wrath on the evildoer. So if your house gets broken into and someone steals your TV, it's not your job to go hunt that person down, break his kneecaps, and get your TV back. Don't take matters into your own hands. I'm looking at most of y'all, I think y'all ain't breaking nobody's kneecaps anytime soon, which is good, right? So instead, entrust your government, right? I'm going to give this to God, and then God has put the U.S. government in place to go find that guy and break his kneecaps, right? Not actually, right? Get back your TV and throw him in jail. And as we all know, the government doesn't do a great job of getting justice. And so what do? God, I want justice and my government's not getting it for me. And whenever we don't get justice in this life, where is it doled out? On Judgment Day, with an eternity in hell. Or it's poured out on Christ, and he takes it all, right? But whenever it's not Judgment Day or Christ, it's the government's job. That's literally what they're supposed to do. That's part of why God has instituted them. They are his agents for punishing the evildoer and rewarding the one who does good. Now, Do governments do a good job of this? No. Governments do a terrible job of this. So who's going to keep the governments in check? We are. Because we're so good, right? Consequently, whoever, sorry, let me see, where is it? Oh. Okay, I'm going to read it through again. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God, so they're all made by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they'll bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror to those who do right. What am I thinking of here? Oh, sorry. Because they are God's servants, if God's going to say they're my servants, who are servants accountable to? To their master, right? And so what's really crazy is that, you know, when some warlord in Africa says, I'm going to go be king. I don't like the president, I'm going to be king. And he goes and kills a bunch of people and he sets himself up as the ruler. On Judgment Day, one of the things that God is going to hold him accountable for is everything he did when he set himself up as leader and everything he did afterwards. And he will be judged to a different standard because his job was to punish the evildoer and bless those who do good. And not all of our governments do that. Not all of our leaders do that. But that's something that they will be judged for because God is saying they're my servants. And as another point here, because God is the one instituting them, it's because God has instituted them that we're going to obey them at all, because otherwise we'd be free. And if you're wondering, what was the thing that the church in Rome didn't want to do to the Roman government? It's surprisingly common. Verse 6. This is also why you pay taxes. So in some way, the Roman church had been known for not wanting to pay taxes. Like there had been some sort of theological position, maybe like, hey, I belong to heaven. I don't belong to Rome anymore. Therefore, I owe Caesar no more taxes, right? If only, right? If only we could do it. And kind of we do, right? Well, at least in our government, there's a separation of church and state. So, you know, I don't pay taxes on, well, that's not true. I pay taxes on some of my income. Anyways, but some of it I don't because of this. Anyways, this is also why you pay taxes. For the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give everyone what you owe them. You owe taxes, pay taxes, right? Like that was the thing for them. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor, right? 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, Paul says, again, I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercessions, thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority. As a citizen of heaven, one of your unique responsibilities as a citizen of earth is to pray for your leaders. It's part of what it means to live out our time here as exiles. Why? That we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. This is good and pleases God our Savior, who wants all people to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. And as Paul writes to Timothy, right, like in 2 Timothy when he writes the letter, he's in chains, right? He's praying, even as in chains, like, God, would you please let us worship you in peace in this country. Pray for Nero, that he would get off the backs of Christians, essentially, is what's going on here. So, key takeaways here. Governments are God's agents of wrath and peace, and they are accountable to him. They are God's agents of wrath and peace, and they are accountable to him. Our obedience to earthly governments is done out of obedience to God first and foremost. Paul makes this very clear. We obey governments because they're established by God. So don't obey a government because you like it. Don't obey a government because you feel a lot of pride as an American and you want to obey your American government. Obey your government because you want to honor your God, right? Well, we'll get to until. We're only on number 4. There's 6 of them, right? We need to be aware. The government that God has placed in your life is not by accident. God has placed the government and God has placed you and done that with the expectation of submission. So, for you, who again is an American, you need to be very aware of what it means to be an American. Very aware of the laws of your land, of your rights and your responsibilities, because that is not by accident. That is by the design of God. He expects you to participate well in this country. So like if you look at the expectations of a citizen in our country, by the way, I think there's usually, it depends on who you ask, but you got to obey the law. You got to pay your taxes. Everyone makes you pay taxes. You're supposed to sign up for selective service, guys. It's the draft. And you're expected to participate in this democracy. We have a form of government where the people are expected to participate. So it's not like you're going to go to jail if you don't vote, but the expectation in the democracy is that you do. It's part of being a good citizen in this country. And participation in democracy is more than just voting, is it not? Sometimes it's protesting. Is it ever rebelling, shooting people? I don't know.
Joe,
Yeah.
it's interesting that we live in a country that, when it comes to paying taxes, some of those taxes could go to like a Planned Parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the flip side, we also have the ability to donate our money to a nonprofit.
Yep.
Or Life Choices.
Yeah.
Which reduces our taxes, which reduces the amount of money that might go
It's
toward
pretty cool.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, if you don't like paying taxes, just give away all your money. That's it. It's your life choices. I like that strategy. That's good. Yeah, and remember that Paul's telling the people in the Roman world to pay taxes to Caesar. Jesus said the same thing, right? And in Jesus' lifetime, there were multiple massacres of the Jews. I'm talking like 2,000 Jews crucified. I'm talking about highways where it's Pharisee after Pharisee after Pharisee after Pharisee. And Jesus still says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Right? So remember to pay your taxes. 5. And now we're getting into, so we've established a heavenly identity and some rules there, an earthly identity and some rules there. And now for the last 2, we're going to talk about the clashing. How do we deal with the clashing, okay? So the next one is God's laws. I'm just going to use win, okay? In your handout, it's supersede the world's laws. God's laws supersede the world's laws. Acts 5, 27 through 32, the apostles were brought in to appear before the Sanhedrin. By the way, in chapter 4, they were preaching, and they kept telling everybody that the leaders of the Jews had killed Jesus. And they didn't like that John and Peter kept blaming them. And they're like, stop saying that we killed Jesus. So they bring him in and they beat him up and they say, don't do this anymore. And then, of course, what do they do the next day? They're right back inside the temple preaching. The apostles were brought in because they've disobeyed and made to appear before the Sanhedrin to be questioned by the high priest. We gave you strict orders not to teach in this name. Yet you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching and are determined to make us guilty of this man's blood. Like, quit putting this on us. Yeah, go ahead.
They did kill Jesus,
But remember, it had happened in the middle of the night.
but they should be proud of what they did.
Yeah, they remember the reason that they killed Jesus in the middle of the night, the reason that they had their trial in the middle of the night is because they knew if that the people knew they were the ones behind Jesus' death, that they would rebel. And so the next day, all of the chanting in the crowds, that's not before the Sanhedrin, that's before Pilate. And so the Pharisees are saying, oh, well, no, Pilate killed him, right? Because they're stirring up their side of the crowd in front of Pilate, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. And James and John, and it's really just the 12 who are aware of the midnight trial, because they were the only ones there at Gethsemane, are saying, no, like, you guys did it. And they're like, shh. Just stop making us guilty of this man's blood. And so Peter and the other apostles replied, we must obey God rather than human beings. And I want to remind you that God never gave John or Peter a command to preach inside the temple. But he did tell them, be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and in the rest of the world. They did have to preach in Jerusalem. But they chose to go back to the temple. And I think, by the way, that the Pharisees would have got them no matter where they were. But I think it's significant that in their disobedience, they went right back to the same place. And we'll talk about how to disobey well in a little bit.
Joe, would it be fair to say that this was sort of an in-your-face disobedience?
I don't think so. I don't think it was a sort of thing. Because it could be.
The temple grounds
Yes.
were under the civil authority of
Absolutely.
the Jewish religious leadership.
Yeah.
And the place that they chose was not their residence.
Wasn't even the Solomon's portico. They're like right in the temple courts. They don't, Solomon's portico is where the teaching happens. They're like, Holy of Holies is right over there. You guys killed Jesus. You guys killed Jesus. Salvation's in his name. That's essentially what's happening, right? So I don't think, the reason I don't think it was rebellious is for the same reason that when Paul speaks against the Sanhedrin, or not the Sanhedrin, the chief priest, and he says, God's going to strike you, you whitewashed tomb. And then one of the other members of the Sanhedrin says to him, like, how dare you say that to the chief priest? And Paul immediately remembers, he goes back to Exodus 28, 12, 20, or Exodus 20, 24:18, something like that. I'm sorry. Where it says, don't speak ill of your leaders. It says, don't curse God and don't speak ill of your leaders. And so he's confronted with that. They know that they should respect their leaders. So I don't think it's done disrespectfully.
But they went back
It's
to the same.
Absolutely, it is. It didn't have to do it that way, but they chose to. So we'll get to why. What would be the motivation to do that, if not to be disrespectful? Because I don't think they were being disrespectful. I'm hoping they weren't being disrespectful.
Right. Well, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is
Yeah.
they chose in the location of
Yes.
their preaching to, I don't know if the intent was to be disrespectful, but they were flagrantly disobeying.
It was flagrant. Yes, that's a good word for it. Flagrant is a good word for it. It was as, and I think the statement that they're making is that we follow God and not man. And they're making that in the clearest possible way that they can. Yeah. Not this, but yes, that we follow God and not man. And I'll show you with a different guy, super important, Daniel chapter 6, verses 10 through 11, what I think is happening in their hearts as well. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room. And you guys know the decree, right? If you go bow to anybody else besides the king for the next 30 days, you go in the lion's den. He went to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. When the decree came not to do this, he had, for years, gone to that window with windows open toward Jerusalem and prayed. And for him not to do that this day would have been an act of fear that he was not willing to do. Verse 11, then the men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So Daniel is scared, and in his fear, he is mustering up all of the faith that he has, the courage that he has to continue the practice. And I think that what helps us here is Romans 14, 22 through 23. Whatever you believe about these things, keep between yourself and God. Blessed is the one who, he's talking about food. What do you think about food? Just keep it between yourself and God. Blessed is the one who does not condemn himself by what he approves. But whoever has doubts is condemned if they eat, because their eating is not from faith. And everything that does not come from faith is sin. So if Daniel had gone to his room and he had closed the doors, that would have not been an act of faith. It would have been an act of fear. And that's why he didn't do it. And I think for the disciples, it's the same thing. They had gone back and preached in that temple day after day after day after day. And if after getting beaten, they said, all right, we'll change locations, it would be an act not from faith, but from fear. And so when we get our takeaways, number 3, first, obey the government. Any disobedience beyond this must come from faith. So let me back up to the first one. When a clash of identities and allegiances take place, when 1 and 2 are pitted against 3 and 4, God must win. We must obey God rather than man. That's clear. We don't struggle with that. But would there be a time when you're maybe called to a level of disobedience beyond that? Daniel could have prayed with the doors closed, right? He could have disobeyed the law in secret. Did he have to do it open? And same for the Peter and John and Peter could have just said, okay, I can't preach anymore. Hey guys, we're moving to Capernaum. We're gonna go move to Bethlehem. It's only 5 miles down the road. Let's go preach there. They could have done that. They could have disobeyed in a different way. So why did they go the extra mile of disobeying in the temple? Why does Daniel go the extra mile of disobeying with the doors open? Because to do otherwise would not have been from faith, but from fear. And because of that, he doesn't do it.
I have a question. So it's like you said earlier about the citizenship being in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be like they're just following their own laws because they're from another governing body?
Amen. Yeah. So you're following the laws of your host country while you live in a different country. Only when there's some kind of issue here, and when there's some kind of problem. So like I go to China, and the laws of China say I can't preach in God's name. I'm not going to listen to that. Not because I'm an American, but because I'm a citizen of heaven, I'm not going to listen to that command. And maybe I will preach the gospel. Go open air preach. Maybe I'll get thrown into prison. We'll see what happens. But the point is, and so here's the last one. When in fear we shrink back from what we know we should do, God is displeased by our actions, even if they obey the government. So here's the thing. Do not disobey your government from a place of fear. If you're going to disobey your government, do it in faith. And simultaneously, do not obey your government in fear. If you're going to obey your government, do it in faith. Because obedience from fear does not honor God. Obedience from faith does. And disobedience from fear does not honor God, but disobedience from faith does. Does that make sense?
There must be a lot of Christians
Yeah.
in Ukraine for them to walk out and tell the people in the tanks to go home. I mean, right up to the...
Get out of here, right up to the tank, yeah. It's pretty cool.
I mean, there must be a lot of Christians in that nation.
Yeah. Yeah, or just, God likes to do big things with small people sometimes too,
That's
doesn't
right.
he?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
You're talking about going to China and preaching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you go over there, it's hard to explain, I guess. Say they're lining up everybody over in China to shoot.
Yeah.
And you say, I want to get a plane ticket, you can go over to Stanley,
Yeah.
just to get shot.
Don't do it unless if God's calling you to it, it's got to be from faith. So the really interesting example is that we have a guy in church history by the name of Polycarp. And he was this giant in the faith. He had been this bold preacher of the gospel for many, many years. And the Romans had never come after him for whatever reason. And as an 80-year-old, the emperor is like, come to Rome, I'm going to kill you. Just sends him a letter, a summons. And everyone's like, don't go. And he's like, I'm going. No one can stop me from going. Nobody can take away this honor from me. And he makes it all the way to the Colosseum, and he professes the name of Christ and preaches the gospel, and he gets killed. Do you just go to China to get shot? I don't know. Some people have done it. And if you do it in faith, I think you can honor God. I'm not saying that's wise, but I am going to say if you're going to do it in faith, you can honor God with it. And that's not even disobedience. I guess that's obedience.
So is that like being a martyr?
That is like being a martyr. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a difference between Polycarp and just going to line up.
For no reason. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, so, Paul will say, In Ephesians 5, make the most of the time because most of your time because the days are evil. Okay, be wise, right? Jesus says, I'm sending you out like wolves among sheep. You got no defense. So what do you got to do? You got to be wise. You have to be crafty, and you have to be innocent. And we're told to do those things. It's what I love about like Bible smugglers, is that they can be crafty for the glory of God. Crafty, deceitful little Bible smugglers for the glory of God. And it's in faith. It's disobedience in faith. It's a beautiful thing. I thought I heard something over here. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to flip this just a little.
Okay, yeah, please.
Having lived in another country.
Yep.
There needs to be some caution when you're from another country coming in.
Yes.
And you decide, having lived this and seen the repercussions.
Yep.
When you come into another country as a mini missions group and you decide to break the laws of that country.
Yes.
To do your ministry.
Yeah, yeah.
And get caught.
Yep.
Now this is a real thing that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to do what we're going to do. So this ministry group did this, got caught doing what they wanted to do, which was an open air rally.
Oh my goodness, okay.
In northern India. You really should not do that.
Not a good idea. That's
and so they
Hindu
got rescued.
country up there. Hardcore Hindu
Yeah,
country? Yeah.
Very Hindu-ish. And so this group got caught, and so they were rounded up, sent home, and everybody's passport was in, you may never come back again.
Right, yeah.
The ripple effect was that within the next year, a long-term missionary and his kids...
Were kicked out?
No.
Oh, okay.
The RSS group decided one night to make a... what do I want to call it? An example.
Yeah.
Surrounded them and burned them to death.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And this is a ripple effect when people decide they're going to do something for the Lord, but don't live there, aren't established there. We have to be careful of this government and authority thing, because we're going to do something for the Lord, but they don't think through sometimes.
Absolutely. So
this is a dangerous thing when people think they're going to do something for the Lord, but don't live there, work there, and don't realize the ripple effect sometimes because they're coming in and out.
Yeah.
I mean, it was traumatic for those people, for those of us that were living there, working there, had a ministry there, and for Christians, national Christians that are working, or no, not working there, but live there and have to be very careful of a government that, well, hunt them down.
Yeah, so northern India, I think they've been at war more or less with like Pakistan over, they've been killing, so Hindus and Muslims have been killing each other in northern India for a very long time.
No, very much so. But
yeah,
my point
but that's why when Christians come up, my point is that they're like, we've been killing Muslims, we'll kill you too.
Oh, yeah.
We've got no issue with
You
this.
don't want to tip that point. And for Christians that are living there, in anywhere in the country as it is, you can't just run in there and decide we're going to cross that line. So you just got to be careful.
You got to be careful. And the point about this is that whatever you do needs to come from faith.
Yeah.
So study up and be wise. But when Stephen gets killed, what happens in Jerusalem?
Scattering.
A lot of people left. And you can leave in faith. You can leave in faith and say, you know what? That's my cue out of here. And I am going to go to Rome and plant a church until I get kicked out of Rome, right? And that's kind of Paul's mentality. He's like, I'm going to go plant a church in Philippi until I get kicked out of Philippi. Then I'm going to go to Thessalonica, do it again. Go to Berea, do it again, right? And that's one way to take persecution is, okay, that's my cue to leave. How many Jews stick around? Thousands stay. And life gets very difficult for them. Such that within the next 20 years, though the church started in Jerusalem, Paul is bringing money from the church in Macedonia, which is also poor, down to the Jewish Christians. Because the Jews in Jerusalem have become so persecuted that they don't have money anymore. Remember at the beginning of the church where everyone's selling everything and they're giving everything to the poor? 20 years later, they have nothing. They're all poverty-stricken. It got real bad for the Jews.
Wasn't there a famine too?
Yeah, there was a famine too. Yep. So the point is that disobedience and obedience both need to proceed from faith, and that neither should come from fear. Go ahead.
Back to governments and death.
Yeah.
The establishment of a government for capital punishment.
Yeah. They're fully allowed to do that. God gives them the sword. He doesn't give them the spanking stick. He gives them the sword. You kill people with swords. Yeah. He gives them the electric chair for this. And the sword, by the way, can be turned in on your own people if they're doing bad. It's also, I would say, why governments are allowed to raise armies and go attack maybe not attack other countries, but defend themselves from other countries to punish the evildoer. Yeah. Okay, we have one more of these points, and we're going to run out of time tonight, so we'll have to maybe pick. I have dealt with way less issues than I wanted to in this class, so that's okay. The last one is that Christ transforms culture. And if you're wondering, what am I supposed to do here in this world, in this life? I would say that this is your mission, right here. It's to transform the people around you. And so, as an example, Luke 7, Jesus is in Capernaum, and a centurion comes before him and says, I got a servant who's sick. Can you heal him? And Jesus says, yeah, take me to him. And he says, no, it's all good. I know what authority is. You stay there. Just tell me that he'll be healed, and I know he'll be healed. You don't have to go. I know how authority works, right? Just this massive statement of faith. And God does not take him out of the evil Roman Empire's army. He leads him right there to be the force of change inside the Roman Empire's army. And then later in Acts chapter 10, Peter is chilling, and God gives him a vision about this cloth coming out of heaven and all these unclean foods. And he's like, God, I can't eat these. These are unclean. And then, the next thing that happens is he gets a summons to Cornelius, another Roman centurion. Same deal. Cornelius and his whole household get saved, but not so that they can come out of the evil Roman Empire, right? But instead to be a source of change in it. And let's not forget that at the same time that God is transforming the Romans soldier by soldier, that he's also transforming the Jews. Peter is going through his own cultural transformation, and when he comes back, he tells his fellow people, like, God gave the gospel to the Gentiles. And they're like, holy smokes, I guess you can go into a Gentile's house and not be unclean. This is crazy, right? God begins to transform the culture of the Jews. And I would say that the gospel continues to do this. One more example is the two soldiers, or some soldiers, who come to John the Baptist. So all these crowds, they come to John the Baptist, and they say, what should we do? And John says, anyone with 2 shirts should share it with the one who has none. Anyone who has food should do the same. And the tax collectors came, and he said, what should we do? And he said, don't collect more money than you're required to. So he doesn't tell tax collectors taking money from the Jews and giving it to the Romans to quit their job and get out of the system. He says, stay right there, just be fair. Be a fair tax collector, and let that transform, right, the world around you. And then some soldiers come and they said, John, what should we do? And he doesn't say, quit your jobs because the Roman Empire is awful. He says, don't extort money. Don't accuse people falsely, and be content with your pay. Stay right where you're at. Stay right where you're at. Revelation 7:9, Paul says, John says, after this I looked, and before me there was a great multitude that no one can count, from every tribe, nation, people, and language, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, wearing white robes and holding out palm branches in their hands, and they cried in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. In heaven, all of these Americans are going to be there, and you're going to be able to tell that they're Americans because they're going to be speaking in English. Salvation belongs to our God and to the Lamb who sits on the throne. Actually, because they're Americans, they'll speak all kinds of stuff, right? They'll speak English, and they'll speak Spanish, and they'll speak Korean, and you're going to have all of these people, even there in heaven, right, who at least for this scene, for this moment, what we are seeing is that the gospel has transformed every single culture and ethnicity and language on planet Earth. And there is a beautiful cultural expression of the gospel in American society, and that's what we want to live. And we want to let our testimony and our light transform others. And God might call you to do that as a police officer, or as a soldier, or as a politician, or as any number of things. To be the light and to be the salt. And one day we'll see that full picture of every possible kind of person transformed by this glorious gospel of Christ. So takeaways: Christ transforms culture through your life and witness. To transform culture, Christ will put Christians into every corner of our world, including even the Roman Empire's government. And your earthly identity expressed through the gospel is an eternally beautiful and God-glorifying reality. Oh, we don't have time for any of the situations. The first one at the top there is the American Revolution. So that's a fun one. Everything that we've talked about right now, go back to the American Revolution. Would you or wouldn't you declare independence? By the way, who has read the Declaration of Independence? It is very difficult to read. I was just reading it before tonight. I was like, goodness gracious. And then when I started looking at all the reasons for why we left, you know what they boil down to? We don't like the way that the crown is impeding our ability to rule, and we don't like this excessive taxation. And so we think the best thing to do is declare that we're free of the British crown. And I was just like, whoa. Because, man, and I lived in Texas, right, where there's secede bumper stickers everywhere. But if Texas was like, yeah, we're out, forget the rest of the states, we're going to do our own thing right now, I would be pretty freaked out. I'd really struggle with that, as a Christian. And so, not saying that you can't. I think you can in faith. If you look at the beginning of the document, they're like, we think God's given men inalienable rights. We think you guys are getting in the way of these inalienable rights, and so we're declaring freedom. And I think that there's probably men who signed that that Declaration of Independence, and they were doing it in faith, right? And they believe that in faith, and whatever faith leads you to, your faith in God, your understanding of the situation, that's what you should do. The next one is masks and vaccines, and I don't think I even wrote anything for that one. That might be the third one. I think I literally just put masks and vaccines. I didn't put a hypothetical. We just thought we could talk about that. What's the second one on there? Guns. Oh, yeah, man. So so in America we have a right to, and this comes from that, the government's not doing what it's supposed to do. So like, what do you do if they come for your guns? And I just hope, guys, that your answer is, I'm going to shoot anybody who comes and gets my guns. I really hope it's not that. There's nothing biblical about shooting the cop who's coming for your guns. That's just not honor God. But if you're like, hey, I have a constitutional right to these guns, you're right, you do. You don't have the constitutional right to shoot anybody because they're taking them, right? Deal with that however you may. That's just my thought. I would rather go to jail and be harassed for the name of Christ than kill anybody over this. Yeah.
That was what the revolution was fought about.
Over the right to bear arms?
No.
Oh.
It was fought about government oversight.
Government oversight, yes.
So take out whether it's taxes
or something else,
or masks.
Yeah, no matter what the issue.
It was government overreach.
Yeah.
And it was government using its power.
Yep.
In the case of the colonies.
Yeah.
To extract money from the colonies.
And give it to the crown.
To finance a war in Europe.
Yeah.
That's the background. It gets lost. We say, well, they don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah.
No. They didn't want to pay taxes, so it was just an extraction.
Yep.
That there was nothing being given back.
Right.
To the colonies.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it was taxation.
A fair percentage that joined the revolution. That's why they joined.
Yes. So I want to be clear. I'm not trying to recount history, and I don't want to use the American Revolution to say this is an okay way to do it either. What we have to do is come back to it as Christians and say, what would I do What in faith could I do? Because, by the way, if you don't like how we're being taxed, or if you have a problem with government overreach, the framers of the Constitution would be appalled at our current situation. And we're still pretty far away from what could happen in Rome, in their empire, where the tax collector just says, hey, I think you owe me this much, and you just got to pay it up. That's crazy. So, anyways, we don't have the time to discuss those tonight. I just give those to you as food for thought. Walk through it. Think about it. Make sure that at the end of the day, what you do proceeds from faith, not from fear. And I think you'll be okay. I think God will be pleased. And we don't always do the same things, and that's okay. We don't always wear masks. We don't always get vaccines. We don't always participate in a revolution. And that's okay. Just make sure you live in faith. Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for faith. We thank you that we can walk in it with the power of your Spirit. God, would you guide us? Would you lead us? And would you help us, Lord, not to live in fear? Lord, I think of everybody here who is being told they can't talk about Jesus at work. I think of the dozens and dozens of Christians who have said, I can't talk about that at my job. God, the simplest version of silencing us is happening all over the country, and it's not coming from a government, it's coming from HR divisions. Lord God, would you make your church bold in the gospel? Make us unafraid to lose a job. Help us to stand firm in our walks with you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.